Welcome to the most comprehensive and detailed news summary of the week. Today we bring you high-impact information, geopolitical tensions with Trump pressuring Hamas, new economic sanctions that could unleash a trade war, a crisis in Ukraine with drastic changes in the U.S. stance, chaos in Congress, and, yes, a Cheeto that sold for almost $90,000. All this in a single video. So stay until the end, because what you will see today will make you question what world we are living in. Trump issues a final warning to Hamas to release the hostages. Since the attack on October 7, 2023, the conflict between Israel and Hamas has escalated out of control. In addition, Hamas held more than 240 people hostage. Israel responded with massive attacks in Gaza, and the world was divided between support for Israel and allegations of war crimes. And what has Trump done? In a recent speech, he issued a direct warning to Hamas: release the hostages or face the consequences. He did not specify what those consequences would be, but analysts suggest tougher sanctions against Hamas allies, or even stronger military backing for Israel. How might Hamas react? Hamas has shown that it does not easily give in to external pressure. If they ignore Trump's warning, it could lead to an escalation of the conflict. But here comes the twist. Hamas is not just ignoring Trump, it is responding defiantly. Hamas is defying Trump and demanding a ceasefire in exchange for the hostages.
ورغم كل محاولات العدو احتراما لتعهدات الإخوة الوسطاء من الأشقاء.
A Hamas spokesman responded in a statement saying that they will only release the hostages if there is a lasting ceasefire. This goes against the interests of Israel, which remains on the offensive, and the U.S., which historically supports its ally. What does this mean for Trump and the U.S.? If Trump pushes too hard, he could be seen as an instigator of the conflict. If he does nothing, he will appear weak to his voter base. Is there a chance of a deal? Negotiations currently look almost impossible. Neither Israel nor Hamas seem to budge, and the U.S. is caught in the middle of this problem. But the conflict is not just political, but also economic, which brings us to the next big news of the day. U.S. tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China come into effect. Is a trade war looming? Trump is back on the attack with his protectionist policy. The U.S. government has imposed new tariffs on key products from Mexico, Canada, and China. This means that exporting to the U.S. will become more expensive, affecting the economy of these countries. Mexico and Canada are the most affected in Latin America. Products such as steel, aluminum, and certain foods will face higher taxes. Mexican and Canadian companies depend on trade with the U.S., which could affect their production. China also enters the game. The U.S. imposed tariffs on Chinese technology and manufacturing, seeking to reduce its economic dependence on the Asian country. China has responded with its own taxes on American products. These types of measures usually increase prices for consumers. Companies that depend on imports will suffer losses. Will it be the beginning of a new trade war like the one in 2018? And while the world worries about the economy, there is another crisis brewing in Ukraine. CIA suspends intelligence and weapons support to Ukraine. Is the aid ending? The CIA announced that it will suspend the shipment of weapons and intelligence aid to Ukraine. This is a hard blow for Zelensky, who depends on the U.S. to continue resisting the Russian invasion. Why is the U.S. doing this now? Some analysts suggest the U.S. no longer sees the viability of funding the war. Others say Trump is pushing Ukraine to negotiate with Russia. What does this mean for Ukraine? Without U.S. intelligence and weapons, Ukraine is vulnerable. Russia could take advantage of this situation to launch a new offensive. Tensions reach the White House. Trump and Zelensky have a tense meeting in the Oval Office. Volodymyr Zelensky traveled to Washington hoping to receive more support. But the meeting with Trump did not go as expected. According to leaks, the atmosphere was tense and hostile. Trump made it clear that the priority is not Ukraine, but the U.S. In a nutshell, no more free help.
I don't think you'd be a tough guy without
Trump
the United
wants the
States.
Europeans to take more responsibility in the conflict.
You're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position. But you're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing. I'll be honest, that's not a nice thing. All right, I think we've seen enough. What do you think?
Consequences. Ukraine could be forced to negotiate with Russia. Europe could panic and increase its support for Kiev. And while world leaders discuss war, the U.S. Congress also has its own problems. Al Green expelled from the House of Representatives after protesting against Trump. Al Green, a Democrat from Texas, openly protested against Trump. His actions led to his expulsion from the House of Representatives.
Mr. Green, take your seat. Take your seat, sir. Take your seat. Finding that members continue to engage in willful and concerted disruption of proper decorum, the chair now directs the Sergeant-at-Arms to restore order. Remove this gentleman from the chamber. Members are directed to uphold and maintain decorum in the House. Mr. President, you continue.
Thank you. Over the past 6 weeks, I have signed nearly 100 executive orders and taken more than 400 executive actions, a record to restore common sense, safety, optimism, and wealth all across our wonderful land.
What does this mean? Trump continues to consolidate his power within Congress. Republicans dominate the legislative agenda. But Congress has another big problem. Republicans can't get their own budget through without cutting Medicare and Medicaid. To pass their budget, Republicans must make cuts. But if they touch Medicare or Medicaid, there will be a political crisis. What will Trump do? If he accepts cuts, he will lose support from older voters. If he doesn't, he won't be able to fund his projects.
Resolution that we passed on Tuesday. There is not one mention of Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security. It's not in the bill because we haven't set the policy. What we're trying to do is get America back on sound fiscal ground.
Work requirements, sure, 100%, but anything that slashes into benefits for people who are working, I'm not going to be for it. I think that's probably true of a lot of my.
But let's forget about politics for a moment, because the latest news of the day is incredible. A Charizard-shaped Cheeto sells for $87,840. Why would anyone pay that much for a Cheeto? The collecting craze knows no bounds, and we affirm that Pokémon remains a worldwide phenomenon. But this isn't the first time something like this has happened. In 2004, a Florida woman sold a cheese toast with an apparition of the Virgin Mary on eBay. The surprising thing is that the toast was 10 years old, and according to the owner, it had never gone moldy. She won $28,000 at the auction. What's the lesson here? Well, look at your Cheetos before you eat them. You might find one in the shape of a Pikachu and be the next person to win $90,000. These were some relevant news of the week. There are other important news, but I will upload them in the next few hours. If you like this summary, subscribe and tell me what news surprised you the most. See you in the next video.